Chernoivanenko, the president of the Ukrainian Association for Jewish Studies, and I'm very glad and happy to welcome you on this conference. This is a great opportunity to have a conference, UAJS conference on Jewish art, first time in the history of our association. So this is the seventh conference of the Ukrainian Association for Jewish Studies. The first one took place in 2017, and then we had some other conferences on different topics, different fields of Jewish studies, Jewish history, Jewish literature, Jewish culture, Israeli studies. One conference was dedicated to the state of Israel. And so these conferences, as I said before, is the first one devoted to the study of Jewish art. So we have this two-day conference here in Chernivtsi, in Ukrainian, or Chernivtsi, in German, Yiddish. So which was very Jewish city before, especially before the Second World War, and I'm grateful that I'm grateful to those who came to Chernivtsi. So we have this conference hybrid, which means some of you are online and some came to Chernivtsi and are here along with me in this very good conference hall. Dear colleagues, I have very important notice. So the speakers received this information before the conference, but let me sound it again because I find it quite important that, you know, we are working and even now we have these conferences in wartime Ukraine. So this is real war and terrible war. We face problems with electricity, and thus the internet is not stable. But this conference hall provided us a generator, which means we should have electricity in any circumstances. But if we face the situation when we have no electricity and the generator, so the situation is that there might be a situation when we have no electricity for a very short period, just maybe 20 or 30 seconds, maybe 1 minute. So there is no problem. The recording will be stopped. You need just to re-enter this Zoom room, and we'll continue our work. Is it understandable? Okay. Also, I would like to thank our sponsors, which kindly supported these conferences. This conference, they are European Association for Jewish Studies and World Union of Jewish Studies. One is based in the UK and the second based in Israel. So friends, colleagues, we are highly grateful. Thank you very much for your kind support, especially in this difficult time for us, the Ukrainian Association for Jewish Studies, and for Ukraine in general. So at this moment, let me finish my short introduction, and I would like to give the opening word to to the president of the European Association for Jewish Studies, Dr. Javier Castaño. Javier.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much to all for being today here. So, dear colleagues and friends, as president of the European Association for Jewish Studies, it is my pleasure to welcome you to this conference, Expanding Boundaries, Jewish Artistic Heritage of Ukraine, organized by the Ukrainian Association for Jewish Studies. So I would like to welcome all speakers, those in Chernivtsi, I think I pronounce it well, correctly. So the former Austro-Hungarian city of Chernobyl with high Jewish resonances, and also those who participate via Zoom. And also, I also would like to thank the organizers, especially for their resilience. I mean, this is a key word here. So the celebration of this yearly conference is a manifestation of a will to continue normal life in a time when life is not normal anymore in Ukraine, a country that for more than 2 years defends itself against a continuous aggression mainly directed against the civil population. So for those of you, probably very few who do not know yet, the European Association for Jewish Studies, UAJS, which is co-founding this conference, is the sole umbrella organization for Europe, representing the academic field of Jewish studies with more than 1,500 members from 34 European countries, and also from Israel, the US, and Canada. So its primary aim is to encourage and support the research and teaching of Jewish studies at university level in Europe and other places of higher education and learning, as well as research. So the purpose of the conference grant program, which is funded by the Rothschild Foundation Hanadiv Europe, is twofold: to foster cooperation among scholars involved in Jewish studies across Europe, from Lisbon to Kharkiv, and from Helsinki to Athens, and also to support early career researchers in this field to develop a professional network. So speakers at different stages in their careers from academic institutions from 9 different countries: Austria, Germany, Israel, Lithuania, Poland, Switzerland, Ukraine, United Kingdom, and United States, figure in this program with a high number of women among their ranks. And as I say, this is an excellent example of what the EAJS is supporting, so excellent scholarship. So with regard to the history of Jewish studies in Europe, Ukrainian Jewish studies came into view comparatively late. I mean, as many other countries, especially in the Balkans and in the Eastern Bloc. But it has developed fast and with very important results in Kiev, in Lviv, and also in Kharkiv. My first personal encounter with Ukrainian scholars, colleagues, took place in Girona, and you would remember Vitaly because you were one of those who were there in Girona, Spain, in May 2017, precisely in the context of an international workshop on multidisciplinarity in Jewish studies programs and teaching. So now we meet Ukrainian scholars of Jewish studies anywhere, and many international conferences have proved that academic studies and research is thriving, even under current circumstances that are not so easy. So I would like also to greet those who participate in this conference remotely through Zoom, and the interruption of scholarly communications during the Corona years have shown us all again how important international connections from those who work on similar questions in different locations is. So bringing the scholarly discussion to Ukraine, even via Zoom, is an important way now to increase and show your support for this field, and also to this group of Jewish scholars working in Ukraine. So I will only be able to connect to a few of the sessions, probably in this early afternoon and tomorrow morning, because right now I have to go to attend 2 meetings. And also I'm just recovering from some health problems. And this final period of the academic year coincides with several academic commitments. So, however, I would like to outline that the program is full of issues to learn and to discover. I see some names of friends and colleagues, and I would like to mention here Bracha Yaniv, Miriam Reiner, Ruth Gruber, Monica Chekhanovska-Gutman, Eva Froimovich, to name a few. And the program also contains, in my view, Sephardic resonances, as in the presentation by Elena Salomon on the Spaniard Arbet. To all of you, I wish you a fruitful conference, fascinating lectures, and discussions, good discussions. And so celebrate it. And I very much hope to see soon the arrival of peace to Ukraine and to welcome in person many of you, if not before, at least in 2027, at the 13th European Association of Jewish Studies Congress, which will take place in Alcalá de Henares, next to Madrid, on July of that year. So finally, I would like to, one of the ideas I wanted to, I was looking for some details to connect Ukraine and Spain that are very far away in the continent. And it came to my mind one single detail that proves that even though Ukrainian and Spaniard are very far away, there were connections even on the Jewish side. And I would like to, so probably many of you know that the Frussi family, probably most of you have read this delicious book by Edmund de Waal. So the Frussi family was arrived to Vienna and to Paris from the Odessa hinterland in Ukraine. So one of the members of the Frussi family came to Madrid in the 1920s and married one of the most important families, Jewish families in Madrid. So just this single detail to show you that we are still very close. Madrid is full of Ukrainians now. I would like to say that that this is probably not a good, that these are not good news, because I wish that Ukraine will gain this war and peace will come back to your land. And also the Jewish community here in Madrid has received many of you Jews from Ukraine that are now established also in this community here. So, but these are just a few details of very small importance, because what you are going to discuss is what matters here. And just thank you for organizing this conference, because this really is a very important sign and symptom of resilience. And scholarly resilience will be one of the main ideas to be dealt with in the next Congress to take place in Spain in 2027. So welcome, and thank you very much for being here today.
Muchas gracias a ti, Javier. Thank you so much, and thank you again for your kind support. The support which came from the European Association for Jewish Studies. Can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you, Vitaly.
No. Let me introduce
Okay.
one more important person who would like to welcome you. This is Eugeny Kotlyar, professor from the Kharkiv State Academy of Design and Arts, Ukraine, and also the chair of the academic board of the Ukrainian Association for Jewish Studies. Please, Eugeny.
Thank you, Vitaly. Dear colleagues, it's a great honor for me personally, on behalf of the Ukrainian Association for Jewish Studies and the Ukrainian Artistic and Art History milieu, to welcome all of you to the conference on Jewish artistic heritage in Ukraine. We have been dreaming about this conference for many years. We have long years of cooperation and friendship with many of you, meetings at numerous conferences in Israel and Europe. Today, we all symbolically united under the flag of Ukraine. It's important to note that this is the first international conference on Jewish art in Ukraine in all the years of its independence, starting 1991. It brings together outstanding art historians and your researchers from 10 countries. And I want you to know that for our country and the Ukrainian Circle of Jewish Studies scholars in particular, your participation represents unprecedented support and is a sign of solidarity. We're holding a conference in the context of the current war, in which Ukraine's fate is being decided and a new Ukrainian society is being formed. This society will no longer passively inherit the remnants of the Soviet mentality, but will consciously build its future. Today, for this choice of freedom and European values, Ukraine is paying a terrible price with the lives of its soldiers and citizens, millions of refugees around the world, and cultural heritage destroyed and removed by the occupiers. The fate of the Jewish heritage is inseparable from the fate of Ukraine. The complex problems with the organization of our conference are a visible part of this connection. As you know, we postponed our meeting several times, hoping for a decrease in tensions and looking for a safe place. We believed that our participants would be able to come personally to Chernivtsi, one of the safest cities in what is now Ukraine, where rich Jewish heritage has been preserved. But the ongoing war did not give a sense of security. In this regard, I want to especially thank those who took the risk of coming to us and also express hope for our common meeting soon in a peaceful Ukraine. I would also like to wholeheartedly thank the European Association for Jewish Studies and the World Union of Jewish Studies for their financial support of our conference. Special thanks to the director of the Chernivtsi Museum of Bukovinian Jewish History and Culture, my friend Dr. Mykola Kushnir, for logistic help in organizing and holding the conference. And many thanks to my colleagues in Ukrainian Associations for Jewish Studies. We called our conference Expanding Boundaries, Jewish Artistic Heritage of Ukraine. This forum dedicated to understanding Jewish art and the artistic heritage originated from Ukraine in broader historical, cultural, and artistic contexts. Over the years, Jewish traditional and modern culture associated with the territory of present-day Ukraine has been shaped by various political and cultural conditions. Ashkenazi Jews, Krimchaks, and Karaites lived here and left a distinctive cultural and artistic legacy. Along with religion, there was also secular Jewish life, both found their expression in art. The artistic achievements of the Jews of Ukraine in their diverse genres, schools, groups, and personalities were created over time in the frameworks of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, the Austro-Hungarian, Russian, and Ottoman empires, Poland, Hungary, Romania, Czechoslovakia, the Soviet Union, and finally, since 1991, in independent Ukraine. Now they're perceived as a part of Ukraine's multicultural heritage. The perspective leads us to undertake two tasks. The first is to recreate the history of Jewish art in Ukraine by studying the emergence, development, and spread of Jewish artistic culture within the modern borders of Ukraine. In the 20th century, this culture suffered catastrophic losses. The very memory of the life and culture of millions of local Jews was erased layer by layer. Many art objects from Ukraine are in museums around the world. The inclusion of this collection in scholarly discourse will bring back to Ukrainians the memory of the historical presence of Jews in the multicultural space of their country. The second task is to consider the problem of protecting Jewish heritage from destruction. It is impossible to prevent missile attacks and artillery shelling in the frontline zone and looting in the occupied territories. The impossibility of providing physical protection forced us to look for other ways to preserve our heritage. We are talking about recording, attribution, inclusion in the narrative, and presentation of art objects, both by traditional means and with the help of new media. Researching threatened of already lost artistic works and phenomena in museums, libraries, and archival collections will help preserve the memory of Jewish artifacts and their provenance. Our conference delegates from Europe, Israel, and the United States announced in our program will talk about the historical, theoretical, methodological, and practical aspects of the identification, research, contextualization, and musealization of Jewish art created in Ukraine or by authors from Ukrainian lands. The event will help increase interest in the Jewish heritage of Ukraine and establish links between Ukrainian scholars and museum professionals and researchers from other countries in their work on common topics. An important step towards this will be the preparation of a special volume of the Ukrainian academic journal Judaica Ukrainica with articles by our participants. I would like to once again thank everyone who takes part in this event as organizers, speakers, listeners, sponsors, and partners. I sincerely hope you enjoy our conference. I'm confident that it will attract attention of specialists and the public and will strengthen the role and status of Ukraine's Jewish heritage in the multicultural agenda of our statehood, as well as in the broader international context and academic discourse. Thanks a lot. Glory to Ukraine. Slava Ukraini.
Glory to heroes, Evgeny. Thank you so much. Glory to the Ukrainian heroes. Thank you. Thank you. My fault is that I introduced Evgeny as a professor only and forgot to add that Evgeny is an initiator of this conference and was serving as a head of the organizing committee of the conference. So Evgeny, thank you so much for your work and for all the preparations. And I'm really looking forward to this conference like you, with the panels which brought together scholars from 10 countries from Europe, Israel, and North America. At this moment, let's move to the main part of the conference, and let's start with the first keynote lecture. And let me introduce our keynote lecturer, who is Evgeny again. But now I would like to give you more information, some more information about Eugeny. Eugeny Kotlyar is a professor of art history and the head of the Department of Monumental Painting of the Kharkiv State Academy of Design and Arts, the head of the academic board of the Ukrainian Association for Jewish Studies. In 2022, Professor Kotlyar won the Narkis Prize for Excellence in the Research of Jewish Arts. His main fields of research are Jewish art, Jewish heritage in Ukraine, synagogue decorations, and Kharkiv Jewish local law. He has published about 200 essays, articles, catalogs, books, and edited books, participated in numerous congresses and conferences in Europe, North America, and Israel. He is the author of the publications How Goodly Are Tents, O Jacob, Wall Paintings in Bukovinian Synagogues, Catalog of the Exhibition, and Jewish Kharkiv, a guidebook on history, culture, and memorial places. 5 days ago, his exhibition, 5 days ago, Evgeny? maybe a little bit more.
Maybe
Yeah.
10 days ago.
About 10 days
days
ago, his exhibition, Light of Revival, Stained Glass Design for the Restituted Synagogues of Ukraine by Eugeny Kotlyar.
Oh, years ago, this exhibition.
I'm sorry for this. Can you hear me now? Okay, so about 10 days ago, his exhibition, Light of Revival, Stained Glass Design for the Restituted Synagogues of Ukraine by Eugeny Kotlyar, was opened at Fordham University in New York. Professor Kotlyar has participated in restoration of synagogues and Jewish community centers in many cities of Ukraine as designer and stained glass windows artist, curated art and educational exhibitions, in particular on Jewish art, and also created exhibitions in several Jewish museums in Kharkiv. So Professor Kotlyar's keynote lecture is titled Jewish Artistic Heritage in the Multicultural Context of Ukrainian Identity, Historical Overview and Current Challenges. We have 45 minutes for the presentations, and then we'll have the discussion. So let me tell you in advance that you can ask your questions after the presentation. You can leave your questions in the chat during the presentation. So this is up to you. So please welcome Professor Kotlyar.
Thank you, Vitaly. Thank you, Vitaly. But I don't have the screen. Please share it. Sorry, ekran.
Just a moment.
Yeah,
just a moment.
Yeah.
Try again.
Thank you. Okay. Dear colleagues, I want to talk about the place of the Jewish artistic heritage of Ukraine in the real cultural policy and practice of preservation, presentation, and integration into the multicultural narrative. I will mainly deal with monuments of religious and traditional art. What can be called secular Jewish art, that is painting, graphics, and sculpture by Jewish artists, is a continuation of this theme, but requires a different focus. Today, against the background of a long war, I see two different processes. On the one hand, we delve into research trying to recreate, attribute, and fit certain phenomena of the past into the historical context and space of memory. On the other hand, the living historical and museum landscape of Ukraine Jewry is being destroyed before our eyes. It is being destroyed in different ways, by ongoing neglect, inept restoration, military aggression, and the expropriation of cultural property. I ask whether there is any way to prevent this and to influence the practice of in situ heritage conservation such that it becomes an extension and ultimately integral to the study of heritage. In this regard, I would like to raise the following questions. How did Jewish heritage fit into the general agenda of Ukrainian cultural policy historically, and how is this happening today? Who is responsible in practice for the physical preservation of Jewish monuments in Ukraine? The state, Jewish communities, private, local, or foreign initiatives and patrons, or someone else? Is the Jewish heritage of Ukraine the value and concern of the state, the local or international Jewish community, or those countries to which it belonged in the past? And finally, what are the challenges we face today in the context of the ongoing war in Ukraine? and what steps can be taken to overcome them. I would like to begin with the place of Jewish heritage in the general politics of Soviet Ukraine before the era of independence. So early Soviet and pre-war period. I start from this place since from 1920 to the end of 1922 saw the gradual absorption of the Ukrainian Republic into the USSR. During this process, Ukraine lost de jure and de facto its independence, although formally continuing to be independent according to the constitution of the Ukrainian SSR until 1929. In the late 1930s and 40s, the Soviet Union also annexed the territories of many Eastern European countries, which included the former lands of the Western Ukrainian People's Republic. This absorption automatically extended the policies of Soviet power to new territories, equalizing them in matters of national development and anti-religious pressure with all other lands. The attitude towards Jewish heritage and culture in general was a continuation of the USSR's national policy towards Jews. Over the entire 70 years of the existence of the USSR, from 1922 to 1991, this policy changed in one vector. It began with the forced transformation of traditional Jewry into a new proletarian Jewish society. Later, it continued with a state anti-Semitism policy and the complete abolition and essentially erasure of all Jewish culture, the bearers of which were accused of bourgeois nationalism and cosmopolitanism. During all these years, the only surge of state interest in Jewish culture was the first decade of the Soviet Union. This coincided with another social political struggle against religion and the traditional Jewish community. The Soviet government wanted to educate a new generation of Jews, turning them from the power of religion to the ideas of socialist construction. To resolve the first issue, in 1923, the government began to close and nationalize synagogue property, transferring it into the hands of the Jewish proletarian for use as workers' clubs. Numerous articles in the anti-religious press and photographs of synagogue interiors converted for new purposes indicate that Jewish heritage became an instrument of power in the re-education of Jewry itself. This process continued until the end of the 1930s, then spread to the annexed lands of Western Ukraine. However, in this way, it was possible to at least physically save the largest choral synagogues, which could easily be adopted for new needs. Unlike synagogues, Christian churches were blown up and destroyed en masse. Over time, thousands of smaller synagogues were given over to the economic needs of various organizations, or were simply closed and doomed to depersonalization and gradual destruction. Also in 1923, the policy of indigenization was announced, the purpose of which was to strengthen Bolshevik control and influence in national areas by promoting the development of a national form of culture. The most striking manifestation of this era was the activities of the Kulturliga, Jewish schools, printing houses, theaters, museums, and the development of Jewish literature and art in general. By the mid-1920s, they all became instruments of Soviet cultural policy in the field of Jewish education and culture. By the end of the decade, this policy was stopped, and the national approach was transformed into a class-based one, which meant the virtual end of national culture. A more complex situation occurred with Jewish museums and collections, which the authorities also wanted to use to educate the new state's Jews. Institutions were created throughout the country that took the ethnographic movement to a new level with broad government support, legislation, and control. During this period, Jewish departments and exhibitions were opened in many regional local history and historical museums, for example, Poltava, Berdichev, Vinnytsia, Belotserkva, Kamenets-Podilsky, in the connection of the Kiev Jewish Art School, Kulturliga, etc. In 1927, the Jewish Museum opened in Odessa, one of 4 state Jewish museums that operated in the USSR during the interwar period. This happened against the backdrop of the nationalization of synagogues and the confiscation of religious items, which are often used to replenish museum collection. However, contrary to the political agenda, this movement turned into a desire of the museums themselves and their devotees to show the old culture in all its diversity of forms and originality. In the second half of the 1920s and 30s, employees of these institutions traveled throughout the country, documenting surviving monuments of Jewish culture, architecture, and art. Recent research has opened a huge layer of such field research by famous Ukrainian art historians and museum staff, Danilo Sherbakivsky, Pavlo Zholtovsky, Georgy Brilling, Feodosimov Chernivtsi, Volodymyr Gagenmeister, Kost Korzheminsky, Elizaveta Levitska, Natalia Kotsubinska, and many others who formed the scientific basis of modern research in this area. Moreover, Ukrainian art historians of that time already considered Jewish art as part of the multicultural art of Ukraine. 2 outstanding Ukrainian art historians, Danilo Sherbakivsky and Fedor Ernst, employees of the Shevchenko of Ukrainian Historical Museum, in the concept plan for the first textbook on Ukrainian art in 1925, also assigned importance to monuments of Jewish art. They defined the essence of Ukrainian art and its national boundaries under 4 categories. The work of Ukrainian masters of all nationalities in Ukraine, the work of Ukrainian masters based outside Ukraine, the work of immigrants who worked in Ukraine, and individual works of art involving topics related to Ukraine. This was the Ukrainian centrism of the idea, and Jewish heritage has its place in it. In practice, Danilo Sherbakivsky developed a special methodology and questionnaires for studying synagogues and Jewish cemeteries on site, which he taught to his many students. This was a continuation of other initiatives. For example, the attempts of the director of the Berdichev Museum, Feodosimov Chernivtsi, to open a Jewish museum in a famous wooden synagogue in Pogrebische in 1929. By the beginning of the 1930s, the authorities already viewed museums as ideological institutions. In their opinion, the activities of many museum workers overshadowed the exhibitions depicting success in the re-education of the Jewish nation. This led to the tragic fate of these collections and the repression of their creators. Thus, Jewish heritage in the early Soviet period became material for the construction of the Jewish Museum, permitted and inspired by the authorities for the re-education of the Jewish masses. Its concept was constantly changing, adjusting the presentation of Judaism according to new ideological patterns. Ultimately, the closure of synagogues and museums, their dispersal of collections, and mass repressions turned the monuments of Jewish culture, which had just begun to be scientifically mastered, into a frozen archaeological layer. Post-war and late Soviet period. The attitude of the Soviet government towards post-war Jewish heritage can best be traced through the example of synagogues. It's important to mention the consequences of the Second World War and the Holocaust, which saw many synagogues destroyed. In many of them, despite the anti-religious persecution of the pre-war Soviet regime, Jewish prayers were still heard. Photographs and watercolors of synagogues destroyed during the war, discovered in archives and museums, show ongoing interest in them as cultural monuments, being documented evidence of destruction that either the authorities or Ukrainians themselves were still paying attention to. Despite the fact that in the post-war years, Stalin's policies towards religious Jews were softened, local authorities prevented in every possible way the return of surviving synagogue buildings to the newly formed communities. At the turn of the 1950s, anti-Jewish persecution intensified again and was accompanied by the subsequent closure of synagogues and the ban on all forms of national life. In 1910, in the time of the Russian Empire, about 1,300 synagogues were registered in the Ukraine Republic, excluding Western Ukraine, of course. But by 1952, during Soviet times, only 40 synagogues were officially registered, and by 1964, only 14 were operating. When reconstructing many of them for new needs, the authorities ordered the destruction or leveling of the architectural features of the former synagogues, justifying this with new ideological and aesthetic goals. The remarking of synagogues was widespread, replacing the tablets of the Covenant and the six-pointed stars of David on the facades and window frames with five-pointed stars, a Soviet state symbol. Until the end of Soviet times, in many cities of Ukraine, even preserved and rebuilt synagogue buildings were depersonalized in the urban space. This is evidenced by documents, archives, and even guidebooks of many cities of the late Soviet era, where synagogues are hardly mentioned. It should be remembered that not a single one of the ancient wooden synagogues on the territory of modern Ukraine, and we know of at least 50 such buildings, survived the Holocaust. Many defensive synagogues from the 16th to the 18th centuries stood in ruins. Former synagogues were used by authorities for cultural, sporting, or economic purposes, camouflaged by development or surely crumbled into oblivion. In the museum space, Jewish monuments were mostly kept in storage or continued to reflect the verified ideological line of power. The famous painting by Mykola Pimonenko, Victim of Fanaticism, 1899, which was kept in 3 original copies in the Kharkiv, Kiev, and Dnipropetrovsk art museums, was a clear confirmation of this. The guides made excellent use of it, emphasizing the terrible situation of the Jews and the subsequent salvation and liberation by the Soviet government from the obscurantism of religion, the oppression of their own Jewish community, and Tsarist anti-Semitism. The Jews themselves, caring about the survival and education of their children, turned to other ideals and values, moving further and further from their own heritage. Single reminders of Jewish artistic culture were the articles and materials of the mentioned Ukrainian scholar Pavlo Zhaltovsky, who returned from exile. About once every 10 years, he published articles of monuments of Jewish art in the journal Decorative Art of the USSR, 1966, and referred briefly to Hanukkah candlesticks and wall paintings in wooden synagogues in the books Art Casting in Ukraine, 1973, and Monumental Paintings of Ukraine of 17th, 18th centuries, 1988. But these facts did not change the overall situation. Jewish heritage was erased from all textbooks on history and art, as well as collective monographs, as if it did not exist at all. Thus, until the turn of the 1990s, monuments of Jewish culture was erased from the official Ukrainian narrative, dissolved into general exhibitions, and consigned to oblivion. The Jews themselves, cut off from their traditional by the anti-Semitic policies of the Soviet Union and international organization isolated by the Iron Curtain, could not take care of their heritage. Period of Ukrainian independence. Since the early 1990s, the time of Ukraine's declaration of independence, there has been an unprecedented surge of interest in Jewish culture and heritage in the formation of Jewish life locally. Many Jewish central institutions and local organizations were created that contributed to the revival of Jewish communities, the study and preservation of its material heritage, and the activation of researchers. Numerous expeditions from different countries worked in Ukrainian cities and former towns almost every season. In certain cities such as Dnipro, Odessa, Chernivtsi, Kharkiv, and others, Jewish museums of history, culture, and the Holocaust were created, and many state museums in Kiev and Lviv began to regularly show Jewish exhibitions from their collections, returning Jewish heritage to the museum and cultural field. The topic of the Holocaust and the ordering of mass Jewish burial sites, which were kept silent by the authorities during Soviet times, received a separate focus. To date, large memorials to the victims of the Holocaust have been built in Kiev, Kharkiv, Odessa, and Lviv, as well as hundreds of memorial signs in regions and small settlements, all the sites of ghettos, mass executions, and burials. The topic of the Holocaust returned to the general Ukrainian cultural agenda, entered school textbooks, and became part of Ukrainian national memory and history, along with the Holodomor of 1932-3. In the 1990s, the program of the Committee for the Preservation of the Jewish Heritage of Ukraine was launched. Its goal was to document Jewish cemeteries and especially synagogues for subsequent restoration or to request compensation when the law on restitution was adopted. This program brought together many researchers throughout Ukraine. My contribution, for example, was a description of the synagogues of Kharkiv region. I remember well how in the late 19th I sat in archives and libraries researching the historical addresses of Kharkiv synagogues and comparing them with what I found on the ground. This program ran for about 10 years. It did not result in large monographic projects, a digital database, or practical assistance, but its byproducts were local history articles and guidebooks, which influenced the popularization of Jewish heritage locally. The restitution and reconstruction of synagogues became a separate task for communities, which, in addition to the revival of Jewish religious life, emphasized the Jewish presence in the urban environment. In 1991, the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee opened a program to support restitution efforts in post-Soviet countries by providing advice and financial assistance to communities. Basically, communities tried to return the choral synagogues that had been nationalized in the past. Local authorities often resisted this, especially in the early 1990s. Efforts were accompanied by scandals and accusations against Jews. There were targeted robberies, arson, even demolition of buildings, as in Kremenchuk, Khmelnytsky, Rohobyche, Kamenets-Podilsky. In cases where these buildings had national or regional status of architectural movements, state restoration institutions took part in their restoration, as was the case in Kharkiv, Kiev, and Lviv. In collaboration with Jewish communities and sponsors, they decided how to renovate these buildings in the urban setting. An example is the reconstruction of the Kiev Podil synagogue, aiming to recreate the original design of the buildings as in 1894. In 2003, the synagogue's exterior was reconstructed, taking into account all the details of the original plan, including large domes and decorative turrets. The process of reconstructing old synagogues for new Jewish communities was completed in the early 2010s. More than 100 synagogues were returned, restored, and opened for worship to the Jews of Ukraine. In larger cities such as Kharkiv and Odessa, Jewish communities were able to regain ownership of 2 synagogues, and in Kiev, 3 historical synagogues were returned and reconstructed. Around 50 renovated former choral synagogues have been preserved throughout the country. For example, in Kiev, Kharkiv, Dnipro, Odessa, Drohobych, Kropivnitsky, and other cities. they again began to act as visual symbols of the Jewish presence in the Ukrainian context. To this were added new synagogues in Kremenchuk, Kryvyi Rih, Zaporizhia, Zhytomyr, and other cities of central and east Ukraine, which modernized the image of the Jewish presence, providing evidence of the growth and Jewish heritage. The situation in the Ukrainian provinces was and remains different. First of all, let us mention the fact that Ukraine is the birthplace of Hasidism. During the Soviet era and the Holocaust, many Hasidic movements were forced to move to other regions of the world. Today, many Hasidim return to their roots to visit the graves of the Tzaddikim. The largest places of pilgrimage are Medjugorje, the city of the founder of Hasidism, Baal Shem Tov, and Uman, where the founder of Bratslav Hasidism is buried. Entire neighborhoods with synagogues and hotels were rebuilt around these places. Sadhora, a district of Chernivtsi, where the synagogue and tomb of Rabbi Israel Friedman is an interesting example. After reconstruction, both buildings were united into a single architectural ensemble, which became the hallmark of this area. At least 30 such places are known with the graves of the founders of Hasidic movements and tzaddikim of the 18th, 20th centuries, also new buildings which formed a separate map of Jewish pilgrimage connected with the whole world. And in this sense, Ukraine's Jewish heritage has gone far beyond the geographical borders of the country. The situation is much less controllable, where there are almost no Jews left and where pilgrims do not go. The ruins of the 16th to 18th century stone synagogues remind us of the former greatness of these shtetls. About 40 such synagogues are known in Ukraine, fewer than half of which have survived, and they are dilapidated or in ruins. They include Berezhany, Brody, Grimайлів, Гусятин, Підгайці, etc. They are cut off from the current centers of Jewish life and the attention of the state. Practical interest in the reconstruction of these buildings arose in the 2010s when enthusiasts and philanthropics appeared. The experience of these reconstructions is very different from a careful and thorough approach as in Ostrog or Dubno to a kitschy approach that destroys the authentic image of the old synagogue as in Satani. In the latter case, the architectural monument was simply destroyed by modern reconstruction. The renovation of ancient Jewish cemeteries is similarly arbitrary as seen in Sataniv, Medjugorje, or Horodok. As a result of an unauthorized initiative, gravestones carved from limestone were raised from the ground and removed from burial sites, placed in rows on cement pedestals, and painted white with black or gold relief outlines. This has completely desacralized the cemetery space, and the tombstones themselves are now doomed to destruction. Of course, we have good examples, such as the long-term work of Marla and Jay Osborne and the Rohatin Jewish Heritage Organization to integrate the century-old and now lost Jewish heritage of Rohatin into the multicultural context of the city and its wide popularization. Another successful example is Lviv City Council's international initiative to perpetuate the memory of Jewish history, commemorate victims of the Holocaust, preserve the common heritage, and create urban space memory in Lviv. This was achieved by the memorial and educational complex Space of Synagogues, which opened in 2016 on the site of the ruins of Turei Zahav Synagogue, 1582, the Great City Synagogue, 1801, and the Beis Hamidrash, 1797. The authors of the project did not introduce any innovations which made it possible to create a living and dynamic street space, a space of silence, open to dialogue with the documentation of the past. This approach makes it possible to implement additional projects in the future at a new stage in society and technology, including the reconstruction of Turei Zahav synagogue itself. These individual initiatives integrate Jewish heritage into the broader multicultural Ukrainian identity, showing interest in not only the Jewish side, but also the Ukrainian one. And in this regard, the idiom Ukrainian Judaic, proposed back in the 1990s by the famous Ukrainian linguist Martin Feller, reflects the context of the interpenetration of two cultures, which is important to strengthen and emphasize, especially now during the war and the consolidation of the entire Ukrainian society. The international scandal caused by the illegal removal of Jewish artifacts from two Ukrainian synagogues to a private Jewish museum in Moscow last year confirms that fact that not everyone considers Jewish monuments on Ukrainian lands to be part of the multicultural Ukrainian heritage. Accordingly, they can be taken out, appropriated, and inserted into another context. I'm not specifically talking about narrative here, because historically and culturally, the Jewish heritage of Ukraine is inscribed in different histories. For example, Polish, Romanian, Austrian, Russian Jews, and the history of their countries, which can be used as tools for different interpretation. In this case, I touch on the legal and practical side of exported cultural property. Regarding the former, the illegal export of parts of buildings that have national and local monument status must be made public and taken into account in the provenance. Regarding the latter, Ukraine was simply deprived of its property, taking advantage of the lack of control of the situation on the ground. Considering the country's Jewish monuments a part of Ukraine's multicultural identity, we come to what the aforementioned Sherbakovsky and Ernst proclaimed 100 years ago. It was Ukrainian academics who then identified Jewish heritage as an integral part of Ukrainian national culture. This is also part of what Ukraine is fighting for today. And finally, changes of the current war. Many times in the previous 2 years, for different audiences, I presented chronicles and photographs of wartime destruction of Jewish synagogues and cemeteries in Kharkiv, Mariupol, Bakhmut, etc. In February 2023 alone, about 15 synagogues in the southeastern part of the country were destroyed and damaged. With the intensity of rocket attacks on Ukrainian cities, it is impossible to imagine the scale of future destruction. The war forced the last Jews to leave the former shtetls where old synagogues still stand. The fate of these buildings was previously unclear, but now they have no defenders at all. All these factors raise serious concerns for the future of this heritage. It is curious that along with this, amazing discoveries of Genoese artifacts continue. Just weeks ago, the website Jewish Heritage of Europe informed us that all 20th century wall paintings had been discovered in the former Beit Midrash in Ilyintsy, Vinnytsia district. This is a new challenge, but reminiscent of past times when paintings were discovered in a synagogue in Novoselitsa and in the small prayer room of the Great Synagogue in Chernivtsi in the 2010s. There is a higher probability that similar paintings are hidden under the plaster of other former synagogues. Great effort and investment are needed to uncover them, restore them, and feed them into the local and wider narrative. But what to do next with the originals? The uncovered paintings in Novoselitsa are fixed for memory, but open to destruction. The owner of the painted synagogue building in Chernivtsi can make repairs or sell the building at any time. Who can and should prevent this, and how? These are open questions. We have a clear understanding that the volume of surviving Jewish heritage in Ukraine is so large and diverse that it requires a special structure to deal with its management, control, centralized research, and of course, further integration into the local and national infrastructure. This would be facilitated by the creation of a central Jewish museum in Kyiv or Lviv. To date, no such institute has been established in those cities. However, in these times of war, it is extremely difficult to tackle the physical preservation of Jewish heritage because it is impossible to know where the next rocket will land. However, the first stage, systematic documentation, seems important both in itself for subsequent care, preservation, and popularization. Since last fall, on the initiative of our German colleagues, led by Professor Kilian Heck and Professor Stefan Hoppe, who supported us with his visit to Ukraine. Thank you, Professor. We have been developing the idea of a large-scale project for the digitalization of Jewish heritage in Ukraine. All this time, we assessed the scope of tasks and the competence of the required specialists. Now we are ready to take the first concrete steps to digitize individual synagogues with painting. I mean, in Chernivtsi and Novoselitsa. I really hope that through this example, we can see and understand many of the challenges and solutions. To summarize, I want to say that today and in the near future, Ukraine is unlikely to be able to preserve and present Jewish heritage at the modern level without financial, organizational, scientific, methodological, and practical assistance. I believe that this should be the task of the international community, including many neighboring countries, as preserving monuments that arose within their own historical borders that now lie within in Ukraine is also part of their cultural policy. All these efforts will make it possible after the end of the war to return to real work with monuments, taking into account previous Ukrainian experiences as well as successful cases in other European countries, Germany, Poland, Czechia, Slovakia, Romania, for example. This experience is extremely important since one of the main issues, along with restoration, will be the effective use of these buildings as cultural institutions reminiscent of the historical presence of Jews in many large cities and provinces of Ukraine and their contribution to the overall multicultural context. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Evgeny, for this fascinating presentation. And we're open for the discussion. So, dear colleagues and guests, please you can ask your questions now. I see no questions in the chat. Okay, William Gross, please.
I want to thank you, Professor. I'm sitting here half in tears and half in joy. I was privileged to spend almost 2 months in the Ukraine in 1991 and 92, just during the transition from the Soviet period to the independence. And to see what's happened in 30 years on the positive aspect of restoration, commemoration is incredible, but the further destruction, even of some of the things that we saw, and I don't know who is in charge of restoration projects, but for instance, the Sataniv synagogue, which was one of the most impressive things I saw during 2 months in the Ukraine, and to see what they did with it. And today it's it's scandalous. Is there any way of having some kind of committee with people like you, with Sergei, of people who understand what was the architecture of these places and how at least to preserve something of their character in the restoration? But thank you for bringing me up to date. It was, for me, incredible.
Thank you so much for your question. Evgeny, please.
Mhm. Thank you. I want to ask this question with help to translate Vitaly. Okay, Vitaly, please. In Ukraine. Okay. Я розумію, про що говорить доктор Грос, оскільки всі ці питання, вони дуже нагальні для нашої спадщини сьогодні. Можна перевести.
So this is a translation from Ukrainian into English from Evgeny. So William, I understand completely your question and share this. So this question is extremely important now in today's Ukraine.
Тому моїм завданням сьогодні було показати, що відбувається з єврейською спадщиною на сході Європи, і показати, що це погано контролюється всіма учасниками, акторами процесу.
So the main purpose of my presentation was to demonstrate the state of the and the situation with the Jewish heritage in Eastern Europe now, and to sound to the problem that this process with the Jewish heritage in Eastern Europe, especially in Ukraine now, is not controlled indeed.
Сьогодні не вистачає зацікавлених осіб, таких як Сергій Кравцов, я та інших в Україні, які могли б хоч якось вплити на цей процес, окрім того, що ми можемо про це розповісти в академічному суспільстві.
Не вистачає впливу.
Не вистачає.
And unfortunately, so another problem is that we, Evgeny means the scholars like him or like Sergei Kravtsov from Israel and other colleagues. So this is not enough to influence this situation, unfortunately. So only what we can do is to share this information with the academic audience, with some intellectual audience, and so the problem is that our voices, unfortunately, so that's not enough for changing the situation.
Якщо більш-менш ми розуміємо, що відбувається в музейній сфері, оскільки власники колекцій та ті, хто опікується державними колекціями з юдаїки, вони більш-менш знайомі, і це є таке одне коло дослідників. То ми не можемо регулювати цей процес інситу на місцях, де знаходяться ці пам'ятки, особливо в провінції.
If we can see the situation, understand the situation, and first of all, let's say, control the situation in some institutions like museums that have their own Jewish art collections or Judaica collections, because we know these curators, these persons who are responsible for this collection in person. So we can change the situation together somehow, but we cannot do the same with the let's say minor collections in provinces in other regions, and that's a problem with small collections in small institutions.
Тому знов я можу процитувати два процеси, про які я казав від початку своєї лекції. Що з одного боку ми існуємо як академічне середовище, де вирішуються свої питання, і ми формуємо цей наратив. Да, з іншого боку, на землі відбувається зовсім інше, не підконтрольне нам.
And so finally, Evgeny can say that we can say that there are two dimensions. So the one is academic, when we can understand and see and control the situation, and another dimension, as what was mentioned, that that there are some processes that are beyond our attention, unfortunately. So next are you satisfied, William?
Well, with the answer, absolutely. With the situation, not particularly. I just one more comment, because in Santini, it was not only the synagogue, it's the most incredible cemetery and carved tombstones that, at least from my visit, I saw anywhere. And to see them lined up in straight lines now, as opposed to how it was originally done, and certainly the character of what had happened to it over the centuries was just a shock. It loses everything. So anyway,
Yeah.
it's a complaint, but I thank you very much, Professor.
It's true. It's true. Unfortunately, thank you.
Thank you. We have a few more questions from Piotr Kurochitsky and then from Sergei Girik.
Thank you very much, Professor Kotlyar, for this wonderful and comprehensive presentation, giving us an overview about your situation. I would like to ask you a question about the preservation, and I mean with the preservation the young people. So how is the engagement of young people? How are you steering their attention to this cultural heritage? And in this question is also, I'm just watching the attendees of the conference. It's a pity that we have not spread the link to education, so higher education schools, because they could also participate to see what is happening, and that there is also a Jewish culture in the Ukraine that is under pressure now. And so my question is, how do you see the engagement of the youth? How is the dissemination and making it interesting for the young people who are now concerned with other questions in your country? But I think that the preservation is the first thing that we have to engage also the young people who will come after us.
Я знаю, да. Ні, не треба. Ну, thank you very much. Okay.
Piotr. So the answer from Evgeny is the following: that so first of all, you and other colleagues can agree that this problem is very global, not only in Ukraine, but in Poland, in Germany, in other countries, and not only limited to Jewish culture and Jewish art, to culture and art in general. So in Ukraine here, Evgeny sees this situation as so the main purpose is to work actively with schools, with secondary schools, and to have more exhibitions, and even more. So exhibitions for should be created for general audience, but for YAS there should be some important and sometimes radical changes in the textbooks for these schools, because this is a more general problem when in the school textbooks there are no minorities, or there is very small information about minorities, their history, culture, etc. So this is the problem. So to work actively with schools, this is the main point of Evgeny.
Я маю власний досвід як фахівець в галузі образотворчого мистецтва, як професор, популяризувати це і залучати до цього наших студентів. І хочу про це розповісти.
And just to add that Evgeny is one of those persons, academic persons here in Ukraine, who has an experience of working and popularizing Jewish culture, heritage, but first of all among the students in the universities, not in the schools, but this work for schools, for school years is the important work for the future. Thank you. And the next question is it comes from Ruth Gruber.
Я должен еще ответить, потому что там есть важные вещи.
Ruth, please.
Hi. I just wanted to comment, responding to what Bill Gross said, and also I think Sam made a comment in the chat to the same effect. The destruction of the Jewish cemeteries in Satanov and also in Mezhebis were carried out by a Haredi Jew from Israel. He met with experts. I mean, this has been going on for a while. People try to explain to him in Israel why these places have to be restored and respected and conserved. But it was a Jew doing it, and a Jew with apparently had money to do it, and he claiming to restore it. So according to the local people, apparently it was okay for a Jew to come in and do whatever he wanted. This destruction is just as bad or more as, the illegal taking artifacts from which are not being conserved, taking them away illegally and restoring them. There's a, what to do on the ground to protect these places. If they're not being protected on the ground, if there's not some sort of legal protection, but apparently if you have money, you can come in and do things. Or if you're a Jew and go in and protect and present yourself as a Jew who's going to maintain and take care of these places, it's like a license to destroy, to do whatever you want. So teaching and regulation and some sort of standards should be devised, but it would be very, very difficult to to carry them out or to make sure they're being protected, because money talks. And if money comes in, that's what local authorities who have no monuments protection experience, they take the money. But it was a Jew who did these disasters in Satanov and Mezebish. That's all. That's a comment. I mean, what do you do? What do you do in these cases? How, not just educating students, but getting the monuments preservation people to recognize these places as historic monuments. That's also part of the education.
Well, it's just a proof that money and taste don't always go together.
It's not taste, it's destruction. It's not taste. It's
I'm
lack
well
of
aware.
respect, lack of understanding that these are historic. They've took the graves, away from the graves of the people that they were. It's also not religious. I mean, money talks.
May I add something?
Thank you,
Sure.
Ruth, for this comment. Sergei Kravtsov?
Yeah, I just would like to add something, because I've been in the middle sometime of all these scandals. In Satanev, it's actually, scandal was not only produced by Gabay from Israel, who concerns himself as a holy person and who has some messianic goal, and nobody would stop him on his way. There is also a local agent of the same Gabay, some contractor, his family name is Friedman. I had a pleasure to talk to him, who considers him a great contractor, a great builder, a great restorer. It's exactly that same person who worked on the Satanev synagogue and the cemetery. He has a huge power in that area. And I was told that the administrators, the state-run Commission for Protection of Monuments, they are afraid of him. They are running away seeing him. So I believe it's a question of strong authority, of a strong control, strong professional, administrative, whatever control on spot. Because John Seligman, who tried to persuade Gabay to work this way or another way, he approached this person, Gabay, just knowing that nobody could stop him. But probably here in Israel, we cannot stop Rabbi Gabay working in Israel, but in Ukraine, and I believe there should be a very strong authority which would take care of the monuments. That is my idea.
Thank you very much, Sergei, for your comment. Colleagues, more questions? Okay, before your questions, Sergei, just let me add, following Sergei and Ruth, that in this chart you can see. Can you see the link? So I sent the link. So this is our association's UAJS statement on the illegal Jewish monuments removal and trafficking from Ukraine to Moscow, which happened some time ago. And that was, I cannot say a great, but that was a kind of scandal, first of all, in the academic area. And we addressed our statement also to the Ukrainian officials, to the appropriate institutions, and unfortunately, so that we received only formal responses. you know what it means. So no investigation, indeed, not just a formal response. Unfortunately, not more. But so you can read this statement to know more about that situation happened last year. So we have several minutes remain. So maybe two last questions. One from Serhiy here in Chernivtsi, and one online from Professor Ilya Rodov. Please, Serhiy.
Thank you, Evgeny, for a very interesting presentation. I have one question it consists of two parts, but it's a very short question. So the Ukrainian legislation, as for now, allows only restitution of religious buildings. But in other countries of Central Europe, as we know, in early 1990s, the legislation on restitution was adopted by the legislatures that allowed restitution of all buildings, all religious as well as non-religious. Do you know, maybe in Ukraine, some non-religious buildings, for example, Jewish hospitals, Jewish orphanages, and so on, was restituted by decisions of local authorities. They have right to do this, but if nobody wants to privatize or to buy the building, they have a right to restitute this building to communities. And are any examples of such decisions of local authorities in Ukraine? And the second part of my question is it possible if Ukrainian Verkhovna Rada will adopt new legislation on restitution, similar to laws on restitution adopted in our neighbor countries, such as Poland or Czechia? Is it possible to include terms on monument preservations into this new law? And is it possible to solve this problem by including these terms on monument preservations into this new law?
Thank you, Dr. Hirik. Evgeny, please. So, dear Sergey, the response from Evgeny is that so unfortunately we know no case of returning any secular entity, property, and so on to the Jewish community. So only religious buildings were returned to the Jewish community. Not many cases, as we know, not many cases, but only religious, not secular ones. And the second question, so the answer. So unfortunately, the current Ukraine's legislation doesn't allow to return any properties, any entities to the Jewish communities. So there is no appropriate legislation for that. Again, we're speaking about secular property. So let's say former culture centers, tarbuts, and other ones. Yep, right. Mm-hmm. So, and the final question comes from Professor Rodov, please. Bar-Ilan University, Israel.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to see you, Zhenya, here online. And thank you very much for your presentation and for your very, very important story. I think our discussion revolves around the question, whose is Jewish heritage in Ukraine or elsewhere? And there are several answers. And maybe this heritage or is shared or even in multiple ownership. Local Ukrainian, local Jewish, and Israeli. These are three parts that are in any way try to deal with this. And I think this situation is, of course, problematic, but this situation reflects the real things, because this heritage was always hybrid phenomenon. And I think the other side of this coin, of the shared heritage, is that each side trusts the responsibility on this heritage on somebody else, on other side in this triangular. So my impression is that Ukrainian powers just think about Jewish property as Jewish autonomy. So I hardly can remember cases when the Ukrainian law for protection of monuments was applied in the cases of harm or any damage to Jewish property. So it's Jewish matters, so let Jews to cope with this. This is, I think this is the situation. And I think it should be said very clear. The Jewish heritage in Ukraine is cultural heritage of Ukraine in comparison with all the other sides. So I think we should claim that Ukrainian authorities will treat the cases of damage or improper protection of Jewish heritage the same way as they treat or untreat maybe any damage or improper protection of any other Ukrainian cultural heritage. So it's even not really a question, it's a statement. So I would be happy to hear your opinion about this point.
Thank you, Ilya. It's rather a comment.
But this is a comment from outside. Insider's opinion is most valuable.
Evgeny would like to give a comment, a feedback to your comment, Ilya. Just wait a second.
Есть такая фраза.
So Ilya, the feedback from Evgeny. So he thinks that your comment is very realistic, and so it's the situation we face here indeed, and the only one solution Evgeny can propose here is to incorporate Jewish heritage to the Ukrainian modern national heritage in general, and his presentation was about this, about the formation of the context and the creation of modern the creation of understanding of this modern of Ukraine's heritage. Okay, so and so the opinion is that the main purpose is that we need to unite our efforts, academic efforts, to create this context together and to have Ukrainian, Jewish, Israeli context, bring them together and understand them better. I would like just to add one and repeat one of the points from Ilya. So I mentioned I mean, from myself, from Vitaly. So I mentioned the statement of the UAJS of the last year. So you saw that by link in the chat. And you know, there was some discussion, not very. Let's call this discussion. It's a question too, but there were some comments, and from Ukraine's side, there was one common comment, which was like that, Jews should matter to their heritage themselves. So so that was the main point, and that was very sad. So when we left our comments, so we tried to urge those persons, and let us say that those persons were educated persons, you know, not from the very general public, educated persons whom we know, not from Jewish studies, from other fields, but anyway. So we try to urge even our colleagues, academic colleagues, to consider Jewish objects, the part of our Ukrainian heritage, of Ukraine's national heritage. Okay, so if there are no questions or comments.
Sorry, Vitaly, I would like to draw your and our attention to Sergei Hirik's notes in the chat. He writes here the same, that the state neglects any heritage in Ukraine, whatever. Christian Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, and Jewish as well.
Yeah, right. Thank you, Ilya, and thank you, Sergei. So, okay, dear colleagues, Let us finish this part, this section of the conference, and thank you again, Professor Kotlyar, for this great presentation. And thank you everybody for your comments and questions. So unfortunately, there is no break mentioned in the program between the keynote lecture 1 and the next panel. So we have 20 minute break, and we'll come back in 20 minutes around 1 p.m. Ukraine's time, East European time. So it means I'm going to finish this recording. So you just need to use the same link and to re-enter the Zoom room in 20 minutes. Okay. Okay. See you a bit later in 20 minutes.